Hi, welcome. Welcome to Embark's first podcast of the Roadmap to Joy. I'm Rob Gent, the Chief Clinical Officer of Embark, here with Alex Stavros. Welcome, Alex.
Thanks, Rob. Excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too. It'd be really fun to engage in a dialogue, and the point is to what? Boy, to bring relevant topics, mental health topics, all kinds of health issues, to really be able to shine some light on how do we treat mental health, how do we increase mental health, how do we address the current societal issues, and bring guests on. We're going to be creating all kinds of conversations to be able to be as helpful as we possibly can. So I'm super glad to be here.
Yeah, me too. Kids are over and they're trying to keep it together because it's just so much of a society is telling you to keep it together. And it's all this is this stress and anxiety this is compounding and building on. Surprising statistics over the last 2 years, 1 in 4 teenagers contemplated suicide. And I would assume that the vast majority of parents, not 1 out of 5, less than 1 out of 5, would say that there's a good chance it was their kid. The majority would say there's no chance that's my kid. We don't understand the amount of stress and pressure that's building on the kids, that's building on our teenagers. And we're not set up because we're being overwhelmed with similar information to be able to attune with them at a level that is necessary to deal with this compounding of stress and anxiety, which then just ends up blowing. And then we're in crisis mode. And then what happens is now I have no idea what to do. The simple question often can be, how do I share this event with my kid? The hardest question is, what do I do now that event and all the other compounded create this big blow up and this big crisis, and I have no idea where to get help? I don't know anybody else who's dealing with this because everybody else is keeping it under wraps. And so this youth mental health crisis is this quiet epidemic spreading a lot of times just because this information flow, this news flow, this social media that is compounding that stress that you're talking about with the kids. Pressure to be active, to participate in a lot of activities, to perform. All the kids know what schools their peers got into for college, and they all know the rankings, and it's information overload everywhere. And the parents know that too, and they know that the next door neighbor is.
But it's really hard because we don't want to vilify that stuff.
Uh-huh.
That's what's tough though, right?
Yeah.
Getting into a great school.
Yeah.
Doing all the soccer, all that stuff. The social media is to swing the other way and to vilify it isn't the solution.
Yeah, right.
Right. So it feels a little bit overwhelming, even for the parents.
Hey, even I'm the CEO of a youth mental health company, and it's overwhelming for me.
You're feeling overwhelmed too.
Yeah, it's like if anybody should have the answer, it should be you and me. But we should feel comfortable. We're like, hey, we got it. So it really tells you what's going on out there and how difficult this is.
It's so difficult. So I like this statistic. I just got this. 1 in 3 high school students experience persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a 40% increase since 2009. So we're seeing exponential increases of anxiety, depression, sadness, hopelessness. And it's hard because like the numbers are staggering.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I could go through a list of things. 5.8 million diagnosed with anxiety, 5.5 million diagnosed with behavioral problems, 2.7, this is just in the US, diagnosed with depression. I thought this was fascinating too. Approximately 75% diagnosed with depression also meet criteria for anxiety. Meaning what? These things go together, right? Yeah. You're not just having anxiety. Here comes the school shooting. We're already in a fragile state. But we're so susceptible now to a whole series where it gets compounded, the amount of emotional distress. So we wonder why suicide, sort of ending my life thoughts are happening. I can actually have a tremendous amount of empathy for everybody.
Yeah. The trigger in my mind is when something like this happens, it's a reminder for us to go home and hold our 4-year-old and play with them on the ground. Don't tell them the current events.
Because what does the playing do?
The playing connects with an adult that shows that relationships can be safe, shows that you are valued, develops a sense of self for the child, develops their brain in a way that interacts with another human being in productive and healthy ways, sets that secure base. And when these events happen and we ask ourselves as parents, now what do? I got to go home and tell my kid about this. That's about cognitively that we were just talking about an incident. When we talk about how that is just one of hundreds of things these kids are dealing with, that needs to be a reminder for us to go home and be present, connect. Don't go home and figure out a way to tell them a stressful story better. Go home and figure out a way to give them experiences of safety and unconditional acceptance.
Well, it's interesting because I've gotten the question, how much detail do I give my child?
Yeah.
That goes on.
Yeah.
And what are you saying?
It's not about the detail, right?
Right.
Yeah. No detail's better probably. And giving them more detail, like we know, just in even adult relationships doesn't calm stress.
So in some ways, it's more about, as a parent, it's hard to make that shift to say, gosh, maybe I have this guilt or something that I need to get ahead of the story.
Yeah.
To be able to tell my kids, rather than shifting into this really relational mindset that if I get home from work, it's actually more developmentally valuable to hold them close, give me some eye contact, let me provide some safe touch, let me utilize some compassion and empathy to really ground the child in, wow, just even touching them communicates, it gives them a physiological, neurological experience that I'm inherently valued.
Yep.
I'm inherently valuable.
Yep.
And then I can actually go out. I like the term secure base. In the attachment world, we always talk about secure base because secure base is about what?
Launching off from, going off from, yeah.
And then you go out into the experience of the world and potentials for shame and hurt come up, and then you return to the secure base.
The secure base gives you the context through which you can engage how difficult the world is. And at this age developmentally, they aren't, from a brain perspective, from a nervous perspective, able to do it. So we as parents can't just give them more information. We have to continue to build the base. And as we build the base and build the base, that once they're off on their own and an awful event happens, they're subconsciously going to be able to go back to a base and interpret that event and experience in a way that doesn't overwhelm them unproductively. They can impact them emotionally. They can connect with it empathetically and compassionately, that incident, but it doesn't need to overwhelm them emotionally in a way that is unproductive. But that can only happen if we're able to create that base, and that's not through information early on in life.
Well, I'd appreciate that, Alex. And if we're as we're discussing that, it's helpful to articulate the secure base is the genesis. It's really where the formation of this sense of worth and value happens, and it takes root, right? And I always like to talk about when we have this sense of self that takes root, that is actually what allows us to have resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
That's where resiliency comes from.
Yeah, grit, yep.
So the secure base develops this sense of what I would call neurobiological worth, where we have resiliency and we can go out and experience anything. I wonder your thoughts on, I know for us, we're seeing an increase of anxiety, depression, distress, all kinds of mental health issues expanding. So we're seeing high school, adolescents, young adults, parents. Any thoughts about this sense of, well, is secure base only about 0 to 7? Or is secure base really about, in our society, maybe there's an opportunity to really reinforce the secure base throughout the lifespan?
And if we think about the brain being malleable, is our sense of self or identity, our nervous system, our brain is malleable. And what influences all of that development the most is human relationship. Life, the world is all about relationship. And so we really need to keep that. And when we talk about early on, the 0 to 7, it's all about relationship. So continuing to, those 0 to 7 likely would be the most important, when we're most malleable and most vulnerable, those early years, that the priority of building that base or laying those bricks on that secure base never ends, right?
No, it doesn't. I always talk about we're always should be focused on developing the secure base throughout the lifespan. And it transitions, hopefully, from our parents when we're children. Then we learn how to transition that attachment security and secure base to peers. And then eventually we have romantic relationships, and those turn into what? Those are really interesting in adulthood because we're actually switching off being the caregiver and the caregivee.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about your wife. Is there times that you're really struggling and your lid might flip and you're emotionally exposed and she's there to nurture you and then you guys switch off these roles?
Yeah.
So my question is, you brought up the term vulnerability. I find this a very fascinating word because some people see it as vulnerability means you're susceptible, you have a chink in your armor. Where I'm hearing you use it in a term of it's value.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about what is your understanding of vulnerability?
I think as an adult, it's a little broader, and I might, define it as the process of becoming emotionally whole. The process of becoming emotionally whole. So if we think about what is emotionally whole, it means that we don't judge the feelings, the emotions we have, and we work hard to be attuned to those and how we impact others with those. And vulnerability comes into play when we share that process with others. We invite others into that process of us becoming emotionally whole. And emotionally whole does not mean that this is me with all my good parts everywhere. That means that the good parts and the bad parts and the scary parts and the fun parts are all part of a whole. If we don't make it a whole, it's fragmented. And often what happens when we're not vulnerable is those parts that we don't like, that's part of the fragments, we put them somewhere else. We don't share them. We're not vulnerable. And so for kids can be vulnerable, but not vulnerable in the entire sense of the word because they don't have the ability to share all of their different parts or explore their different parts. But as we become adults, we can start to explore all the different parts, not judge them, accept all of them, and start to expose them and present them to others. And the process we're going through is the process of vulnerability and sharing vulnerability.
Because what does safe vulnerability in relationship produce? Certainly the developmental research, when we look at this, says that ability to experience safety and then I would exchange a term. Vulnerability is being fully known.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's what you're seeing in a whole sense.
Yeah.
This whole sense of that I'm fully known,
yeah.
I'm unconditionally accepted, I have inherent value. Experiencing, not talking, experiencing vulnerability grounds me in this sense of self. Actually, by engaging in safe vulnerability, it reinforces that I'm inherently valuable. And that resolves shame.
Yep.
It actually helps to be a protective factor against shame. And when we do experience that, because I'm curious, but I do know some of this is that those who lack, like the male friendships you talk about, or these safe, vulnerable relationships, what happens? We really struggle with insecurities. We struggle with the sense of self.
I think a lot of parents, when they're thinking about their kids, they want to be better parents. And what's difficult often is that when our kids struggle, we internalize that as our fault. And then that creates shame and that creates anxiety, which just kind of creates this cycle of enmeshment. And a lot of that has to do because we haven't done our own work as parents, or we aren't doing our own work. We're never going to end. But where do parents have a place? Either a couple, husband, parent, wife, is where's your place for where you're doing your work so you can be and show up as best as you can. So then when that event happens, when that awful current event happens and your kids find about it and you need to be there for them and present, you can't just show up after work. You have to have done you have to be on your own journey so that there can be where you end and where your kid begins, and some good boundaries, and that could create a healthier relationship. And I think that's a lot of where parents are struggling right now, is where do I even start to do that? And then, because if we do that work and we know we're doing our best, it's not maybe going to be good enough, but we know we're doing our best. When something goes wrong with our kid, we don't necessarily have to blame ourselves. It's not necessarily productive to blame ourselves. What we want to do in that doesn't necessarily accomplish anything by starting to blame. What we want to focus on is that relationship. And so parents, I think, are struggling to say, when that crisis happens with my kid, and I have shame around it, and I don't want to tell other people about it, and I don't know where to get information, I don't know what to do about it. There's a lot of what we're trying to talk about in this podcast, and what Embark is trying to do in terms of lower the stigma and create more awareness and equip and empower. And
because just in us having a dialogue today, we've talked about a lot of stuff. The purpose is to give some real relevant information to talk about these concepts. I think one of them is to really have a sense of empathy too. We talk about this blame. I like your point about it's hard for parents to even have compassion for themselves, right? I mean, we blame ourselves and where have I gone wrong? And then I brought up the concept of external validation in a way that it's just bringing it up aware that it's easy sometimes when we're feeling not great about ourselves or we're stressed out for the day to kind of bury ourselves in the cell phone and how many likes in the Facebook and stuff, and not to vilify that, but it's lots of times that's easy to escape somewhere else and see like, oh, well, this might make me feel better for a little bit. And I would call that the term happiness versus true joy. That oftentimes it's easy, and I think we do this as human beings, right? Like the shootings are stressful. My work is stressful. The demands, everything is so stressful. And it's like, this is a tough place to live, right? And then I'm hurting. And then, of course, substance. I mean, we're fully aware of the statistics of all this avoidant behavior, right? Substance use to sexual stuff to the wrong. I mean, all of it screams what? I just want to break. I'm not taking any sort of meaning. There's no value in going through suffering. So maybe touch a little about how would you differentiate happiness versus joy that we're talking about?
Yeah, that's, our title of the podcast is The Roadmap to Joy. And, I think that all those behaviors you mentioned, they're coping mechanisms, going back to this idea of being emotionally whole. Good friend Andy Maurer really spends a lot of time talking about this concept, and in our pursuit of not being whole, we develop all these other behaviors because we're trying to suppress these feelings and emotions. And the reason we do that is because we judge them. We judge when something happens and goes wrong with our kids. We blame, we complain, we judge, and we'll judge ourselves. And then we feel something, we judge that versus accept. And what a lot of our world has done over the years is created this sense that the purpose of life is the single-minded individual pursuit of happiness at all costs, because you deserve to be happy. And you should do whatever you want to do and should do to be happy. This is the message that we're being given all of the time. And so we're constantly judging things.
Is there something wrong with happiness?
There isn't anything necessarily wrong with happiness.
Because I want my kids to be happy. I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
I just want my kid to be happy.
I think a lot of parents would say that is their number one role as a parent.
Is to get their kids to experience happy.
And as long as my kid is happy, guess what?
I'm going to be happy.
I'm going to be happy.
I did a good job.
And if they're not happy, I'm not happy. But what does that cause? What happens if you're 10 and you're not happy, and I'm your 42-year-old dad, and now I'm not happy because you're not happy? So you determine my happiness and my emotional reaction. What happens to you as a kid, as a 10-year-old? What is going to go on in your brain and your nervous system, and what is the impact of that?
Well, you're certainly reducing resiliency. You're certainly reducing a capacity to endure. Resiliency is the word. You become more fragile, right? And then happiness becomes more it becomes this fleeting thing that we seek at all costs, because that's our salvation, right? Like that's it. If that's the message.
That's the goal is, if the goal is the individual pursuit of happiness, studies show that the more you pursue happiness, the more elusive it becomes.
And the more anxious I get, the more depressed I get.
When I don't have it, it's a big problem. And if I don't have it, either it's your fault or there's something wrong with me. So I'm blaming regardless. I'm not empowered. I'm now more of a victim of a situation. Either it's my fault and something's wrong with me, or it's other people's fault that are prevented me from being happy.
So what's more enduring?
So the challenge is, I think, going back to acceptance. And if we can get to a place where we're focused on purpose, we're focused on meaning versus happiness, that life is more about finding purpose and meaning in life versus being happy. And we can start to realize that you can experience purpose and meaning in a variety of different situations. And in fact, some of the most purposeful and meaningful times are when we're in deep pain and experiencing extreme suffering that we would not wish on anybody. But it feels we are most connected with this deep sense of why we exist in that moment. So why would we avoid that? So how do we get into that place more? It's going to be part of the question, is to say, how do we create joy? How do we focus more on joy?
Because what is joy? I like what you're saying. Just define joy for me, because help me conceptualize how does joy really definitionally differentiate from happiness?
Yeah. So happiness is a feeling, an emotion that is fleeting because it's based on circumstances. If things happen to go well, I'm going to be happy. If things happen to not go well, I'm going to be unhappy.
But you're a victim of circumstance.
It's based on circumstances. And therefore, if my focus is happiness, I'm going to be focused on trying to change my circumstances versus accepting my circumstance and figuring out how to respond to that circumstance in a way that reinforces why I exist, what my sense of purpose is, my values, and my sense of meaning. And I can't approach that situation or that problem, that circumstance that may be a negative one that wouldn't create happiness, in a way that judges, that blames. I can only respond in a way that reinforces purpose and meaning if I approach it from a place of gratitude and humility.
But that requires something.
It requires a secure base. It requires a secure base, a sense of self.
For gratitude, humility, regret, remorse, guilt. There's a few things that actually that help us function in life and relationship that require this sense of self that comes from secure base. Yeah. What about meaning and suffering, I guess? Can you find meaning in suffering if you don't have that secure base and that sense of self?
I think it's about a mindset first, and it's experience second. If we can shift our mindset, so much about identity or accomplishing things is about telling us that we are something and that we can be something and that we will accomplish something that sets the path for us to accomplishing and becoming something different. So, for example, often with alcohol or with smoking cigarettes is when we say, no, I don't drink, I'm an alcoholic, that's an identity that we've created for ourselves. Or if we say, I don't smoke anymore, what is your language for I don't smoke anymore? Means that you're a smoker, but you don't smoke anymore. Our language matters. And so as we start to change our language, as we start to change the way we dress, as we start to change the places we go, as we change who we hang out with, that starts to create new experiences, a new mindset, new perspective. And then we want to create experiences to say, if you have a mindset that there is purpose and meaning, and there can be purpose and meaning in suffering, Let's believe that. And let's not avoid suffering at all costs. When there is suffering, let's lean into it, experience the fullness of it, connect with that pain, with the difficulty of it. Don't rush to trying to figure out, well, why did I experience that suffering? It must be for something else that I want to do. Because it will come in due time, but we don't judge. We don't judge that moment. We focus on that experience in that moment. We're likely going to be more connected with the people around us than we've ever been before.
Well, Alex, I'm so appreciative of what you're saying because I can't help but think about the book is on your desk and it's on my desk. The Book of Joy by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
I know in reading that book, you and I have certainly, it was so amazing to read that joy is made up of this interesting balance that has to be this balance of suffering in order to be able to then experience joy. Without pain and suffering, we actually don't know the flip side.
Yeah.
And happiness is just one side of this proverbial coin that we don't get the fullness. So I always liken it to, looking at Mother Teresa. We're not that we're all going to be to Mother Teresa's, but why did she choose to go into Calcutta and serve the impoverished and something? She got joy out of that. Yeah. Some real meaning and purpose in the suffering.
Yeah, putting ourselves in situations where we can experience hardship struggle is important. And we need to do that from an emotional perspective. We need to do that from an intellectual perspective, put ourselves in the growth zone where we're slightly uncomfortable, where we're slightly stressed. And that helps us grow. And that's going to put us closer to circumstances that might create some pain and suffering. Or just going to places where we see it. Sometimes people don't even want to go see somebody else experience pain and suffering. If we expose ourselves to that, and it's another reason why when we have parents whose kids are struggling, it actually is an opportunity. The goal isn't happiness, the white picket fence, the Disneyland family. And that situation you're in right now may be as good as it gets. That may be as good as it gets. And if we change our mindset and say, if this is as good as it gets, how would I engage differently in this relationship? How would I be present? How would I find meaning and purpose in that? It may be a lot different than saying, but my family isn't the white picket fence family that the magazines told me I was supposed to have. We get to engage in this process of creating joy in a much different way. And so families then, when they get to these situations where there is stress, there is anxiety, there is a crisis, they don't immediately judge it. They find opportunities to find purpose and meaning. And then it's going to be okay. And this is normal. And it's okay to feel stress. It's okay to be anxious. It's okay to have shame and be depressed. All of these emotions are normal and okay and valid versus, and we can withstand them. We can handle them. Because if we make them okay and we can feel them and have them, then I can live with them. But if they're not okay and I can't live with them, what's going to happen at the end of the day if they don't go away? I have to do something to make them stop.
So when you describing this, you've done such a great job of describing it. I think it's important to highlight that it's really explaining and accentuating why we've entitled the podcast Roadmap to Joy, rather than Roadmap to Happiness or Roadmap to Avoiding Suffering.
Yeah.
We didn't say it that.
Right.
The Roadmap to Joy was very intentional because of our understanding of joy and how even the people listening to this podcast, and hopefully they will, attend all the ones we do. It's really about creating this capacity that we make purpose in life much more meaningful. Mm-hmm. That it's just not, let's help you out with your mental health. Let's just reduce anxiety. Mm-hmm. It's much more enduring, and it drives actually this connection, this meaning and purpose that comes from a relationship. Mm-hmm. That's what our focus is.
Yeah, way of being. So who are you most excited about having on? What kind of topics are you excited about?
Boy, great question. We're going to have lots of people on. I think it's important to talk about this process of joy is more holistic, right? Can you compartmentalize it? Like, man, if my work was better, I'd experience joy. we're not going to compartmentalize. We are going to look at more of what I would call functional holistic health. So I'm excited. I'm looking at my list here. We're going to be addressing a tremendous amount of issues that I think will be relevant to all kinds of family relationships, from development, attachment, trauma. We're going to be talking about divorce, marriage. Man, what are those hardships that happen within families? Who's not going for something like that right now, right? Especially with all the scary school shooting. We're certainly going to want to address some societal issues. I think social media.
Great. What just the idea? How do we create boundaries? My daughter's 11. She's asking for a phone. Do I give her a phone? And no, don't give her a phone. But all of her classmates have a phone, so now I have to give her a phone. Okay, now I can give her a phone. What do I give her access to? This is what parents struggle with. And then now that she's exposed to something, how do I handle that? And there's all these very practical topics that parents are struggling with. I'm struggling with to understand how to engage. There's a lot of people that have explored. There's no exact perfect answers to any of these, but there's a lot of great experts that can help shed the light on how to engage with these difficult topics.
Well, I'm excited to have those people on and make it really helpful. I mean, I'm really excited to even talk about some things like OCD and PTSD. I mean, they're growing, right? I've got written down here neurodevelopmental issues. I mean, how many of us now are aware of somebody who has a diagnosis of autism?
It's grown exponentially. And why is that? And there's some theories connected also to not necessarily with kids, but Parkinson's. Also, my dad was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and the rates of Parkinson's have also gone through the roof. All of these things are interconnected in a variety of different ways that are fascinating. And with the knowledge, we don't need fear. Knowledge is power. And we can accept all of it. We don't need to judge if we don't know what the answer is, or I didn't know that and I messed up with my kid. If I would have known that, I would have done things differently. We just need to know that we've all messed up with our kids. We've made thousands of mistakes, and we will make thousands of mistakes. And you're still unconditionally accepted, which means that you were doing your best. And when I can accept that I did my best, then that next moment that I'm with my kid, that's going to be the best moment I can have, and the best moment. But when I'm caught up in my head about what I should have done, how I can be better, that's me and all my stuff getting in the way. That's gonna, tear down the resiliency that we're trying to build in our kids.
Alex, we've certainly run the gamut on a big widespread of things, right?
Gosh, we could talk for hours, and I think that family members, when I'm hanging out with other families or cocktail parties, these topics come up all the time. And I think if I'm a mom or a dad out there, if I could just be a fly on the wall with these types of conversations. And so that's what we're trying to create with the podcast. You're able now to be a fly on the wall, and we'll bring in these experts. And, the topics and conversations are endless and so relevant and so important to this day and age and our youth mental health crisis. Teen and young adult anxiety, depression, and suicide are at all-time highs today. And Embark Behavioral Health has set out on a big, hairy, audacious goal to take those rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide from the all-time highs of today to all-time lows. And we believe that the way to do that is to create more awareness, to lower the stigma. And that's a big part of what this podcast is all about. So it's a great opportunity.
Yeah, I think this is going to be helpful not only for the people doing it, but also for you guys as the watchers and the listeners on this podcast. We're excited to bring you evidence-based, highly researched interventions and doing the research around the current topics in our society right now. So we look forward to seeing you on our next one. Thanks,
See ya.
Alex.